We're good.
Good now?
I'm fine.
Okay, so my presentation is on medical interpreting. When I first started looking into medical interpreting, I was planning on doing research on the different subsections, categories, and job positions. As I started researching more and more, I decided instead to switch it to what makes a qualified ASL interpreter and the risks for not having one. So, the topics that are going to be covered today are the statistics associated with ASL interpreting in a medical setting, and secondary language interpreting in general, because these same statistics can apply to spoken language interpreting. The specific cultural barriers for ASL interpreters in a medical setting, the risks, and I'm going to cover the CATIE Center. The CATIE Center is a division associated with St. Catherine's University, who is attempting to set up and standardize medical interpreting in an ASL situation. So first of all, the statistics. So these statistics are taken from the Annuals Emergency Medicine Study, which through their studies have concluded that 22% of errors in a medical situation are likely to have clinical repercussions, but only when you're using an ad hoc interpreter. So an ad hoc interpreter is somebody who is not a professional, a family member, somebody at the office who knows sign language, or something along those lines. When you're using a professional interpreter, however, those numbers for clinical repercussions, now clinical repercussions can include anything from simply needing to go to the interpreter or go to the doctor again, switch your medicine due to a misdiagnosis, or it can be anything more life-threatening or serious, medical complications, mixing of the wrong medicines, something along those lines. While using a professional interpreter, the chance for a life-threatening mistakes were nearly half that of an ad hoc interpreter. And the most interesting statistic that this journal found was that having no interpreter at all was better than having an amateur or underprepared interpreter. Passing notes back and forth with your doctor if you're deaf is more successful than having an underprepared interpreter.
Wow.
So you would think that that's not the case. You would think that having some form of actual language, like shared similarities, would be a better solution, but it causes more problems than it actually solves. So continuing with the statistics, interpreters who are going into a medical setting. So medical settings are the second most common specialized setting in ASL interpreting. This includes ER visits, regular doctor appointments, any of the specialized doctor visits, and 51% of interpreters accepted their first job less than 1 year from the start of their careers. So within a year of finishing this program, 51% of people will go and actually interpret in a doctor's office because they're that common of a situation that people need. 65% accepted within the first 3 years, and 20% of people who accepted these assignments felt very prepared, whereas 2% did not feel prepared at all. So those stats are better than other specialized fields, but that's mostly because medical interpreting covers such a wide range of subjects. It can be a simple annual checkup, or it can be a OB/GYN appointment with a possible pregnancy complication. So due to that, with the wide range, it reduces the chances that the interpreter will feel less prepared because it's a broader subject range. So, in a national survey of deaf Americans, the medical setting, it was the most difficult to find a qualified interpreter for. So that means they found it more difficult than legal interpreting, more difficult than educational interpreting, was to find somebody who actually knew medical interpreting in medical situations. In a medical situation such as a doctor's appointment or an ER visit, the interpreter is the only professional present who does not have a medical background. So that's definitely something to consider when you're going to look into actually heading into medical interpreting. Maybe you should take some science or biology classes, or maybe enroll in a nursing program or something like that so that you can have actual medical experience. Because as it stands, if you're not good with blood or if you're not good with needles, you are the only person there like that. And that's gonna be a problem, it's gonna hinder your job. So the deaf community specifically is its own cultural identity, and they don't always interact with the hearing world in a lot of ways. 1/5 of deaf people report rarely or never communicating with the hearing world at all, and most physicians, jumping down a couple points, most physicians rarely communicate with deaf people inside or outside the office. So due to this, a lot of physicians don't know or recognize the fact that the deaf people are a culturally independent minority. So jumping back up to the top of the slide, 9% of the population is considered deaf or hard of hearing, but only those who were deafened at 3 or younger are culturally deaf. Everybody else suffered hearing loss, hearing damage, something like that, that made them deaf or hard of hearing, but they are still culturally hearing. So because of that, a lot of medical professionals view being deaf or hard of hearing as something that needs to be fixed as opposed to a cultural identity. So you as an interpreter have got to be very aware of the deaf person's background and the background of the medical professional, or you're going to run into a lot of problems really quickly due to the doctor assuming that you are there to help the patient instead of interpret, or something along those lines. Another very important fact that deaf people have to go through that other cultural minorities do not is that there is a possible lack of information or access to your own personal family history.